Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video I want to talk to you about Dustin Poirier. So Dustin's future is pretty up in the air at the moment, but he does have a lot of options available. He's just a month off losing to Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title, which we can't lie here, that was his last shot at the lightweight title, and as amazing as it would have been to see him end on that note, being the lightweight champion after all this time, we just aren't going to be able to see it now. And it's really not only going to be interesting, but it's going to be tricky to see where he should and could go from here when it comes to fighting. But he has just been on Ariel Helwani's show, where he's given us a lot of insight into where his head is at the moment. Now, obviously, it is pretty difficult for him. I mean, his family doesn't want him to fight anymore, which he has stated multiple times in interviews, but then also in multiple interviews, he actually has stated that he's still hungry for a fight, which we have definitely seen through a lot of his tweets. I mean, he's a future Hall of Famer, meaning if he decides to have one last fight, he's definitely got the options to create a big challenge that he's hungry for. So I think that this is a great time to really break down Dustin's options and what he could and should do moving forward. Now, a possible move that stuck out like an absolute sore thumb is Michael Chandler. Now, Dustin, in the Ariel Helwani interview, he went off on Chandler. Honestly, I think he borderline dislikes Muscle Milk Mike just as much as Conor McGregor at this point.
Muscle Milk Mike, you're going back.
Well, I mean, come on, dude. Look, no thanks. Retire. We good. Who the fuck is we? You just got here, buddy. You're not one of us. You're not we. I've been here. You know.
Right.
Come on, dude.
That annoyed you?
We are good. Who's we? You know, welcome to the UFC, dude. You got one win in the UFC.
That pissed you off?
Yeah, bro. He's not one of us. You know, I've been cutting my teeth in the UFC since January of 2011 or 2010. You know, he just got here. Who's we? He's speaking for the lightweight division?
Right.
Dude, Muscle McMike needs to chill.
And in all fairness, Dustin has accomplished a lot more at the top of the game in comparison to Chandler, and then of course choked him out in their fight. Now, this fight, regardless, just stylistically, and if it's anything to go by from like their last fight, I mean, it's just going to sell seats. So in terms of, you know, actually being able to sell out for the UFC and everything like that, there's not going to be a problem there. But in terms of justification for Dustin, he doesn't want it. It also just doesn't make any sense, and I don't see him wanting to give Chandler the satisfaction of another chance to actually fight him and beat him. Now, speaking of not giving the satisfaction to an opponent, Conor McGregor. Obviously, Dustin's biggest rival within the UFC, and honestly, probably Conor's as well, aside from Khabib Nurmagomedov, obviously. But aside from that, I mean, they've had a huge storyline over there for the last 10 years. Now, similar to Chandler's fight, it would bring eyes and everything, but it's just a level up from that fight. So this would definitely sell all the seats without a doubt, and it's a bigger fight for Dustin. But from Dustin shitting on Conor for pulling out of his Chandler fight with the pinky toe injury and beating him in their third fight with the checked leg kick, I think Dustin just doesn't see Conor as credible anymore. I mean, he's beaten him in the trilogy, and most of all, Dustin just doesn't need the money, which Conor, that's Conor's biggest draw there, mainly for a lot of fighters, is that he brings so much money and brings the attention to them. But Dustin's already got all the attention and he's got the money there as well, so he doesn't need what Conor's going to bring. So what is in it for Dustin? If he never fights Conor again, he's always going to be one up on him from that last fight. So what's the point in risking it? As big as Conor is, I just don't see it being a fight that Dustin's going to be hungry for anymore. And furthermore, it's more distasteful for him, as he sees Conor as being a bad human being. I mean, Conor crossed lines with him that he can't come back from, you know, commenting on his family and everything like that, which Dustin's a very big family man.
Why is there still animosity there between you and him?
Dude, he crossed lines you can't come back from, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And still.
Yeah.
And so when you see that, how do you react internally? How do you,
when
you see the tweets, you know, talking about your family and stuff like that, how do you?
I want to whip his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like you don't show it. You don't respond right away. You don't do it. Like, do you need a minute to chill? Do you?
Because I felt like when he does it, like the other day I saw him say something.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what he's trying to bring that out of me. He wants me to like fire back or something. Like, I'm just like, go on with my day.
Is it hard?
Yeah, because of course I want to say something right back and try to, you know, set up a fight with them and do, you know, I want to, but it is what it is, man.
I feel like he would rather fight you than Chandler at this point.
Yeah.
He makes it a lot more personal with you, and I to a degree, I feel
And we
like
have
that's
a lot of back and forth over the years, you know,
Right.
since 2014.
And he simply just doesn't want him involved in his life anymore. So honestly, I wouldn't blame him for this list of reasons as to why he just doesn't need the Conor fight anymore and why he doesn't want to have anything to do with Conor anymore. You know, ultimately, I can see why that's just not going to be the fight for him and why they will probably never fight or be involved with each other ever again. Now, let's move on to a matchup that I think, especially from a psychological standpoint, could be more likely than at least, you know, the Michael Chandler or the Conor McGregor fight. And that's Max Holloway. Now, when I say psychologically, remember Dustin has beaten Max twice already. And aside from Volkanovski's performance in the third fight with Max, Dustin was probably the second most dominant fighter to actually beat Max. Now, don't get me wrong, Max Holloway is at the top of his game right now, and he has a number of options that he could take, with Ilya most likely being the next one at 145. But I mean, if he really pushed for it, he could get Islam Makhachev at 155. He is at the top of the sport at the moment after what he did to Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. And with that matchup, with the performance that he had at UFC 300, there's absolutely no doubt that he would want to continue to perform at 155 because he just looks so good there. His weight translation was fantastic, especially even the power as well. And I could definitely see Max wanting to get a win over Dustin before it's all said and done for Dustin. And there's definitely that opportunity there for him. And I do talk about this matchup specifically between Max and Dustin a bit more in my UFC 302 matchups to make video. So if you haven't seen that already, I'll leave it in the description. But looking at both of these guys, if Max wins, he gets a win over one of the most notable names in the sport and gets to redeem his losses to an extent, you know, kind of like Adesanya did with Pereira, knocking him out in their last fight. It's a bit of a redeeming factor. And then for Dustin, if he wins and takes out Max again, he is just cementing himself further into that Hall of Fame status, especially if he can chin Holloway as well, which it's always possible. Dustin's just got bricks in his hands, so there's always that possibility there. So it's definitely a fight that I could see Dustin being more attracted to over Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor. But I think there are two more fights that make even more sense for Poirier, and I would use this as a strong backup if either of the next two don't happen. And firstly, out of the two fights, it's got to be Justin Gaethje. Now, this one, I honestly, at this point, think that it could be the most likely out of all the fights to actually come to fruition, even after like the next one that I'm going to go through, because they both have one KO TKO win over each other. So the trilogy fight is just staring everyone right in the face, including the both of them, and Gaethje is forever up to the challenge. Dustin Poirier literally stated in an interview that he is open to the trilogy.
All right. Somewhere. But that's a fight. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje for a third time. Two guys that maybe aren't fighting for the belt now. That seems interesting to me. That seems interesting to these people.
You know, I don't like to leave things unsettled. We are 1-1 with one KO apiece. So the rubber match, I don't know, we gotta see.
And they are both at the same stage in their careers as well. And honestly, this win or lose for either of them is a perfect fight for both of them to retire off as well. I mean, they're both not running for the title anymore, and they are both fan favorites. They'll both sell out the arenas. Obviously, we look at UFC 291, sold out the arena there, and the storyline is just there as well. So mainly in terms of MMA, this is basically, for me, the no-brainer pick, in my opinion. Now, last and honestly, this, in my opinion, is Dustin Poirier's best option, and that's Nate Diaz. This is a fight that I don't know how, somehow we've just never got it across the last 10 to 15 years that we just have not been able to see for some reason. I don't know, but it's just insane. But I know that from an organizational standpoint, it may be difficult depending on how long, or if at all, it takes Nate Diaz to return to the UFC, which Dustin thinks is unlikely that he'll actually return. And they've tried to book this fight on multiple occasions, which is where it could be a stretch in terms of actually happening. And that's the justification in the last 10 to 15 years as to why this fight never bloody happened.
It's how you retweet the Nate Diaz thing.
Dude, because me and Nate
That's the one.
I don't think the UFC is going to do business with him, man.
You don't think so?
I don't think
Even
so.
after this win?
I don't know, bro. Last time I spoke to the UFC about Nate, it was another one where this was close to happening. It was almost done, and then it fell apart again, which it's done a bunch of times with me and Nate.
Yeah.
And then they told me, they were like, we're not going to do business. We don't want to do business with him anymore.
There's been multiple occasions where it has not come to fruition. I mean, we've got Dustin Poirier, who he was going to come in on short notice, a day and a half notice, at the shit show that was UFC 279, which was Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, that then got turned into Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson instead. But it actually wasn't supposed to be Ferguson at one point. It was actually going to be Dustin Poirier.
And dude, I even accepted a fight against him on 24 hours notice. I was going to fly to Vegas and weigh in the same day, the night of the Khamzat stuff.
Come on.
Dude, I woke up, I don't think I've ever told this story before.
No, I don't know about this.
So it's a crazy story the way it worked. Mike Brown flew in on like Thursday to Louisiana just to come visit. We went out to dinner, we went to sleep. Friday morning, I wake up, my phone is like a bunch of missed calls, a bunch of texts. I'm like, oh, something happened, what's going on? It's my management, Hunter, everybody from the UFC reaching out and saying, hey, he's not gonna make weight. Can you make 170? FaceTiming with Nevada State Athletic Commission, stepping on the scale so I can show them I can make weight safely. I'm like 176. I'm just gonna be 170 the same day.
Yeah.
So I was gonna fly out the next day. I started cutting weight and everything. I accepted, man, I've accepted so many fights against Nate. He can say what he wants, but the UFC knows the truth.
Wait, so what happened? So you said yes.
Yeah, they somehow switched it up, and then, who was it?
You fought Tony.
He fought Tony, and then somebody fought Khamzat, maybe at a different weight.
Kevin Holland.
Yeah, they just switched it around, but I was in, and I was gonna go.
So yeah, that just never came to fruition, which sucks. But I think, honestly, Dustin should be throwing almost all of his eggs in this basket to try and get this one done in boxing. So yes, it may not be in the UFC, but if you have Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz in like any sport, whether it's fighting of any kind or bloody badminton, people are gonna watch it, like without a doubt. It's a no-brainer. You couldn't tell me otherwise. People will watch these two fight in anything. They could verse in knitting. It wouldn't matter. And honestly, I think that if Dustin can make this happen, especially in boxing, he can end his career with a very high possibility of knocking out Nate Diaz. You know, aside from Thompson a million years ago with a head kick, no one has been able to knock out Nate Diaz. So that's just a huge notch in the cap for anyone regardless. And aside from the title, that is without a doubt one of the biggest high notes he can leave on in his career, or for anyone's career, to knock out Nate Diaz. And Nate just isn't going to be able to damage him anywhere near to the extent of like Chandler, McGregor, Holloway, Gaethje, everyone we've been through. He's not going to be able to damage Poirier to that extent. So it's clearly the lowest risk versus highest reward option that he could go for. So in terms of the options that he's got, he should push as hard as possible for Nate Diaz, even if it's in MMA, but I definitely think he should be trying for boxing. But if not, then he should then try and seal the deal for a trilogy fight with Justin Gaethje. And if he wins, he ends it on that high note in an absolute war. And if he comes out like he did against Islam Makhachev in his last fight, I do seriously think that he could take the trilogy over Justin Gaethje there. So overall, no Chandler, no Conor. Definitely go for Diaz in boxing, or if he stays in MMA, go for Gaethje, and if they both fail, aim for Holloway. So let me know what you think Poirier should do in the comments down below, and check out my similar video that I have on Luke Rockhold and what he should do next and how he should or could end his career just like Dustin is about to do. I've just got that linked on the screen here, and with that, please like and subscribe for more MMA based content, and I will catch you in the next one.